Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Give me 2 moments because my Skype has just decided to play funny beggars. So give me 2 moments, folks. I'm going to reconnect to the Skype to the network. If my guest could just hang up for a moment and I'll call him back in just a moment, that would be absolutely fantastic. But stand by, folks, stand by. I'll be coming to you in just a moment on YouTube. The doc is in the house. Always fun when the doc is there. Here we go to you. 2 seconds. There we go. Welcome, everyone, to today's broadcast of The Kev Baker Show. With me, of course, your host, Kev Baker, and I'm coming to you live from not so sunny Scotland. Yes, the weather is absolutely drastic here. I had to venture outside the house today. I wasn't very willing, by the way, but I had to venture out, and the weather is absolutely shocking. So this is a good time, you know, if you're in the UK right now, a lot of us are spending a lot more time at home. Then I can't think of a better way to spend it than to be tuning in to Truth Frequency Radio, shows like this, The Kev Baker Show, and so many others. And I have got such an amazing show lined up for today. The last time I had today's guest on, we had such fun, and the information was of such a caliber that we got around 50,000 views on that show within the first week of it being out. Now, that's just an indication of the kind of information, the kind of show that lies ahead of all of you right now, because we have got 2 hours with Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Now, if you haven't heard of Doc Ram before, hold on tight. This is going to be one heck of a ride. A very, very positive, uplifting one. And Dr. Richard Allen Miller has a long and extensive resume in the field of physics, metaphysics, and agriculture. Now, here are just some of the highlights from his very rich and varied resume, from solid-state physics to states of consciousness and very much more in between. Prodigious from an early age, 2 of Richard Miller's high school science projects were adopted by NASA, including one used in the Mariner 4 mission to determine the amount of water on the planet Mars. Now, at age 16, he built a linear accelerator and a hydrogen bubble chamber for a science fair project and was the first American to demonstrate particles going faster than the speed of light. That is nothing, folks. Just wait till you hear the rest of this. He has been involved in research and projects, many at top secret level, that have formed the basis of several modern-day scientific inventions. Now, Miller's research in the field of the paranormal began as a graduate physicist working 11 years with the Navy Intel. Now, his work includes foundational papers on a holographic concept of reality and an embryonic holography, and work with microwaves and synthetic telepathy. He was used as Timothy Leary's experimental guinea pig to see what the effects of LSD were when taken by a Mensa-level genius. Now, Dr. Miller was the real-life character that the X-Files' Fox Mulder was based on, investigating unexplained phenomena for Navy SEAL Corps and MRU, which put him in the path of many incredible life experiences, including an encounter with an alien and travel to an underground Antarctic Nazi base. 2 of those stories there I will never forget because the doc has shared them with me on the show before. But it doesn't stop there, because he conducted ESP experiments with astronaut Edgar Mitchell on the dark side of the moon, as he developed early protocols and trained Navy SEALs in ESP and super soldier techniques. As an agriculturalist, he is a recognized expert in the growing and marketing of crops and herbals, and has invented ingenious and effective farm machinery specific to the type of crops to be harvested, and had input into production of some of the largest crop producers in the world. So with all of that out of the way, and it barely does this guy any credit, Doc Miller Welcome back to the show. It's time for what we call Miller time. How you doing, man?
Well, I think what I should say now is live from New York. It's
Tell you, dude, when you reached out to me and you said, St. Patrick's Day coming up, how about we get together again? You put the most massive smile on my face because the shows that we've done, and I've done over 1,600, Doc, I've met many amazing and fascinating people, and it takes nothing away from them to say that you, sir, you absolutely stand out, and the shows that we've done together rank right up there, right at the very top of the pile. And I can't wait to find out what you've been doing since we last talked, how you're doing, the new books that you're getting into. And you were telling me today you've had a really hectic day, meeting with Hollywood directors, this and that. I tell you, man, you got it all going on.
so I have discovered that the laws of physics change with different altered states of consciousness. And what we're doing now, the military, is mapping where one state stops and another starts. This whole movement now on psychedelic mushrooms for healing, like the CBDs from marijuana, um, what's really happening there? What's that?
No, I never said anything, Doc. No, on you go.
I heard you. I heard you. You're talking behind the camera. Okay, yeah. Okay, no problem. When you take, I'm working with a professor emeritus in Oxford and some people in Belgium right now, and have formed a new company actually growing psychedelic mushrooms up in Alberta, Canada, with the University of Israel. And what I was growing psychedelic mushrooms back in early 70s when I worked at Boeing and Lunar Base Alpha 1. The mushroom, psychedelic mushroom, is basically a toxin, and it has a chemistry, psilocin, psilocybin, norbobiocystin, the list goes on. All of these chemistries are very similar, but quite different than the neurotransmitters that are being produced in your brain. Dimethyltryptamine, that chill that goes up your body, is an N comma and hyphen dimethyltryptamine, whereas what people smoke in a glass pipe, is 5-alpha. Steve Blake made that. Now, what happens is the brain freaks out and overproduces that neurotransmitter that's a lookalike to the invading chemistry. And the invading chemistry is immediately washed out into the urine, broken down into salts like lysergic acid, diethylamide, and it's gone from the body. And the body's reaction for the next 24 hours is a response to the overproduction of these neurotransmitters from your own body. Now, what these neurotransmitters are exactly, the current model that we're embracing at this moment, is that they are resonant cavity oscillators that dialogue with subtle bodies outside the physical body. The most common one that's known is chi. Hammeroff and others have talked about that as microtubules with structured water. We know that at the moment of death, there's a 5-gram weight loss in every human being. What is that? Well, nobody knows yet. And it's been proposed that it is microtubules, very small proteins that have captured structured water, H3O2, and goes back to the multiverse. And if you
Now, Doc, I remember looking at Stuart Hammeroff, when I was looking into the quantum effects of the brain. And these microtubulins, I mean, they basically, would I be right in saying that they really do have quantum properties?
They're outside the physical body. We first postulated that before Hammeroff was even out of diapers. When I was working at the University of Washington under Richard Nixon, we were studying acupuncture, and we needed to know how you could poke the left arm with a needle and experience a reaction in the right arm when there were no circulatory systems that would account for that. Nobody knew how that worked. And so what happened next was that Richard, there were actually under Ray Fink, Don Vanica was the chair on that. We had brought in a barefoot doctor from China. We had a ring of anesthesiologists watching him. I was a physicist watching him, where they would poke these things and they would get these reactions. And circulatory systems in anesthesiology include blood and oxygen and things like that. But we had no idea how you could poke the right arm and see a reaction in the left arm. There's no nerve ganglia systems that do that. So that's where microtubules first entered into the literature. And then Hameroff, 20 years later, started doing that. It originated at the University of Washington School of Medicine and Department of Anesthesiology for 4th floor. That's where it all originated. Delgado was in one lab next to mine before he went back to Yale doing chip implants in monkeys, rhesus monkeys, and Moore was on the other lab on the other side of me doing ketamine, telepathine, and BZ gas studies. And so we were the boys from Brazil trying to figure out what's going on. And that's when we started to understand telepathine is dimethyltryptamine today. That's the Rick Strassman drug, one that Rick Strassman and others are doing studies on today. But it all started at the UW. And the microtubule is a small protein enzyme wrap that stimulates from ATP, adenosine triphosphate, a paper I wrote suggesting that that's where cold fusion occurs in the body. Kurvan had gotten a Nobel Prize on that area earlier when he's talking about sodium and potassium turning in cold fusion processes in the body, but nobody knew the mechanisms. And that's what we were about, was trying to postulate a theory that we could test and, amplify into some kind of a tool. So that's where we started. Microtubules went to the next level with Jerry Pollack when he started talking about memory water. And Jerry was my lead back then in 1970. And so I have a full resume on his backgrounds, but I have to say 5 grams of structured water is, newsflash, enough memory to hold 100,000 lifetimes of memory. And that's because water is 1,000,000 times more efficient than gallium arsenide or gallium and arsenic when you put two solid-state physics devices together and form what's known as a forbidden zone. That's your area where you do all your memory and check some errors and all that kind of thing with redundancy. And water is 1,000,000 times more efficient. And that's where you stick that inside a microtubule and that disappears at the body. There's your description of the soul on a physical plane. Who knows if that's real? Because, and this is important to realize, physics does not have the answers any more than religion. Basically, that's physics is limited with definitions and assumed truths. And one assumed truth is that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. But if you today can show that space is curved, you can prove the Earth's flat. It's with tensor mathematics. Now, the big question is the Earth flat or round? And the correct answer is yes, because space is a construct. It's not real. And because it's not real, if you choose to look at space this way, then these are the realities and doors available. If you choose, however, to see the Earth is round, then you have these doors and that realities to go to. And so you choose models that allow you access to other universes that you're wanting to study, multiverse, string theory, whatever. The new mathematics for those buffs out there that want to go to the next level will be knot theory, where you take a string as a plasma and tie different knots in it and the way it squishes physical space. Knot theory is Kaufman and some of the others that are in that regard. Math is a really important tool, but again, has its limitations. And we can go into that in another talk if you'd like. Mathematics, they universal language. Yeah, right. Good luck with that. I'm not sure that language is anything but an error on man's part. You
It's
know,
a
when the
glitch.
whale sing in the sea, what they're doing is a form of medicine, just like the American Indian tradition. It's oral, QBL, Kabbalah, word of mouth. And they're passing on their songs and dances to their offspring. It's an oral thing. And dolphin, with their clicks and whistles, is such a complexity that at the time I did John Lilly's work at Berkeley, I suggested it was a form of Clifford algebra. However, less than 2 months ago, they have discovered that the dolphin language is not a language at all. It's images, three-dimensional holographic images that they are projecting to others in their tribe. And when you realize that these mammals have larger brain cases and are firing more of their cerebral cortexes, like orca, it humbles one to realize that it's all about food chain, and this is not about man. There are mammals on this planet that I can prove are way more sensitive. Women love their dogs because they're closer to spirit. And something else is going on here, and that's the part I'm really interested in, trying to figure out where we belong in the scheme of these things, because we're certainly not at the center of our universe. And Bob Dylan, my favorite, had to say, everybody's got to serve somebody. And so it's about food chain and hierarchy. And man is just one little cog in a large system of resonant cavity oscillators.
And I certainly agree. You know, this is some holographic simulation type construct that we're in. Sometimes, Doc, I don't think our brains have the capacity to even visualize what the heck this construct is about. But you mentioned at the start there these mushrooms that you're working on, and I want to get more into that because I know that's something.
I'll bet you did.
Yeah, I wish I could, but I know that's something you're very, very keen to talk about as well. And of course, these can take people to other dimensions, other levels of consciousness. You also mentioned how the military is looking at the different states of consciousness as well. What do you mean by that?
Where would you like to go? Hypnosis? You know, hypnosis, back at the time I was doing the studies at Mission Control, that was 1971 with Ed Mitchell. When we did those studies, both ESP and hypnosis were pseudosciences. Today, ESP is associated to instinct and thinking with the gut, your first brain. As an enteric nervous system, there's a hierarchy of resonant cavity oscillators dialoguing with each other. And when you come from that place, you don't make mistakes.
Doc, I've found in recent times, it used to be, you know, I would say something like, oh, gut feeling. But I literally, in the past couple of years, I can physically feel that gut feeling. Are people more sensitive? Are we waking up to it more? Are people paying attention to it more? What do you think's going on there?
Yes, all of the above. It's all becoming more awareness. And really where the business actually occurs is the mind's eye. If you can see it in your mind's eye, that is what makes it real. And the mind's eye is only just the beginning, because I've got a mind's eye. And man, if I can imagine it and I'm archetypally you and you are me and I am the walrus, then we have the possibilities of footprints and archetypal events where common knowledge is, that would suggest that nobody's original in their thought. And that these are limitations or memes, if you will, of what man can do and what distinguishes him different than an elephant. I have watched an elephant from Cambodia paint itself using its trunk. And that mammal showed an awareness of self I don't have. I know how people see me, you know, with my little logo and my hat and all the rest of what I do, laugh and giggle. But that mammal has more self-awareness of how other people see it, and it depicted that when it started painting itself. And so I am seeing, like dogs, they're closer to spirit. They're they're not necessarily more intelligent, but they don't make mistakes like a human does. And dating the same kind of woman is a metaphor.
I've
I'm
seen
just
tests as well where dogs start barking when their owners are leaving a property miles away to come home, but they already pick up and sense on the fact that the owner's on the way home. They'll make their way to the door and sit and wait. I mean, that shows a level of awareness that we can only dream of, right?
I know it's you have to understand that everything's got a soul to it, and that I don't know how to explain this, but the Bordeaux Thidal, which is Tibetan Book of the Dead, says at the moment of death, man is given one last choice, and it is to either go into the blue light, which is essentially getting off the wheel of karma, or the tunnel of light that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and James Hillman would discuss in near-death experiences. And the tunnel of light has always metaphorically reminded me of a birth canal. And when you have 5 grams of water leaving your body, that is enough memory storage for 100,000 lifetimes. And you could envision a game, a video game in the future, where you personally are outside space-time, and you've decided to plug in for a couple hundred lifetimes, playing a role, because consciousness, as you are currently enjoying it, does not hold the content to reality that something like lucid dreaming does. You're in a dream state here right now. And that is almost all of our physics agrees on that element of it. The consciousness has limitations to it. I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't believed it.
And I often say nowadays, be careful what you believe, because you'll end up seeing it. And what I'm hinting at there is, you got to watch the power of your mind, Doc. We're able to manifest a lot of our reality, I think, but it's just my thinking. What would you say to that? You would be kind of an
Well, you
expert
can take it to the next level, and you could say it like this. Man has a responsibility for the thoughts he chooses to entertain. Joseph Campbell said it when he said, when you see the kingdom of the Father on earth, the apocalypse has already occurred. It is perpetual in its potential. You think we're at the end of days right now with martial law and no pubs open, and you can't go to the store without the National Guard, or protecting the store owner from rioting. We are in for a bunch of BS, and I don't know quite how to counsel people other than to say that the fear of the Wuhan is going to kill 100 times more people than the Wuhan virus itself. And that's a fact. And what is actually fear is an enemy of man, first enemy of man, or is the Castaneda. And when you realize that the media is responsible for this crap that's going on right now, I think there's going to be some war crimes involved here.
We're almost on the break. You're listening to Dr. Richard Alan Miller. This is what we call Miller time. And if that first segment was anything to go by, oh wow. Just get ready, folks, because it only gets better from this point forward. And let me take this quick opportunity before we go to the break to remind people that coming up after today's show, it will be the Freedom Link right here on tfrlive.com. And I'll be back tomorrow night, same time, same place, and it'll be open lines and all of the COVID updates. Right here tomorrow, you can have your say on the Kev Baker Show. I know you love it when the phones are open, and we really get some of the most interesting people calling in. So tomorrow night, we're going to do near enough the full show with open lines. And if you want to check out the doc's work, head on over to richardallenmiller.com. That's richardallenmiller.com. We'll be getting into a whole lot more with the doc when we come back on the other side. Don't go anywhere. We're just getting started. Okay, Doc. Now we're still on YouTube. We've got, wow, climbing up towards 300 people watching us on there live. And
Good for you.
yes,
Good for you.
I tell you, Doc, they're here to see you. Trust me. Tell me then, what have you been up to since we last spoke? You been at any conferences? I know you've got the new business on the go.
Well, this morning I had John Golden over. He wrote a book called Once Upon a Time at San Quentin, and he's asked me to turn it into a series of screenplays. And we were talking to Hollywood producers this morning.
Wow.
Now, if you thought Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was over the edge with the Manson family, well, you see what we're going to do with San Quentin, man. The Code of Silence. All these different constructs came out of San Quentin. And law enforcement and corrections needs reform, big time. It's turned into a big business. They're not rehabbing
it's like
criminals.
They call it the prison industrial complex, you know. It's and when I look at the prison systems over there, Doc, compare it to the prisons over here, wow, that is wow.
It's terrible. It's I had a friend, they couldn't bust her. She was a real criminal. And drove a getaway car in a bank robbery and was a big drug dealer and all of that. And they couldn't get her. So what they did is they put her in a room with someone that had tuberculosis.
That is just...
Yeah, who broke the law?
Wow.
You see, that's what's happening in our law enforcement over here. They're as bad as the criminals. And there's no rehab. And the distinction between a prison and a penitentiary, which was, by the way, a Quaker concept, is just a penitentiary is where you can go learn a skill, go to college and rehab yourself from smoking and being a criminal. But that isn't what they do now.
No.
And what John was a second generation. There's my phone. He was a second generation guard that grew up in San Quentin and ran the high wall with the rifle that would protect guards that would go on into the yard with criminals. And you can imagine the sharp breath of intake when criminals were hearing a 30-30 shell going into their chamber. Kachinko. That's how we're going to do that screenplay. I knew Frater Shiva when he had Solar Lodge in L.A. when Manson family was part of OTO. And Shiva and I are still standing. The Mansons are history. And I'm going to try to do a Once Upon a Time in San Quentin, rival that.
So did you know? Hollywood. So did you know Manson?
No, I never met Manson himself. I had Bundy and one other mass murderer in courses I taught up in Washington at the University of Washington.
Now, wait a minute, Doc. You can't just drop that on me. Now, we're about to go back to the network, but we need to pick this up when we come back to the network. This is fascinating. See, folks, this is the type of character I'm talking about. You could listen to Doc Miller for hours. That's why I always say this is a very special treat. It's almost self-indulgent, me having somebody I enjoy so much on the show, Doc. It truly is. But we need to get you over to Scotland, man. We need you over here. Right, we're going to go back to the network.
I would like to. I would love to do Findhorn.
Here we go.
Yeah, Go ahead and do your opening. Findhorn.
Welcome back, ladies. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. As you can tell, I have got Doc Miller in the hot seat today. I'm riding shotgun. This is absolutely amazing so far. And of course, the Doc, during the break, you know, he just nonchalantly drops names here, there, everywhere. We started mentioning Charles Manson, the Manson family. And I asked the Doc, did you know Manson? And Doc, you said you didn't know Manson, but there was a few other big kind of
Yeah,
name.
yeah, like Ted Bundy. They thought I was Ted Bundy and then the Zodiac murderer because it was someone extremely intelligent. And Miller's got an arsenal out there by Duval with a bunch of militant underground, blah, blah, blah. And
Wow,
once
man.
they found out I wasn't a mass murderer, then they asked me to do law enforcement with them. And I helped bust not Manson. I busted the Green River murders. Scientology. There was a group out of Boston called The Process. We broke them down. There was a group down in Olympia, Washington, a bunch of gay men that were raping and then murdering in the form of sex young kids, runaways, as part of a magical ritual. The way I helped them discover who they were and what they were doing was I discovered which grimoire that they were using. And once we knew which grimoire, magic book they were using for the rituals, we were able to capture them and stop that nonsense. There's a lot of things like that. The adrenocortisone, blood drinking, with Dracula, the idea of immortality by bathing in children's blood, that kind of thing. Are these things real? No, not really. What's real is your belief system in something. And that's a tool. And that's one of the protocols I trained SEALs was how to change a belief system like you would a pair of clothing. An example would be that if you were a very strong Christian, you could get your team killed if you went into Iraq or someplace like that. We didn't, at the time I was a SEAL, we didn't have problems with Iraq. It was more like Cambodia. But with that said, what you would do is take your Christian beliefs and fold them up very neatly like you would a favorite sweater and put it away for the heat of summer. When winter came up, then out comes your sweater again as a belief system. And you had favorite belief systems. Some people like Christianity. Really, the construct of religion is primarily for fellowship. It gets back to the Hobbes and Kant and dealing with civil and natural law, and where you give up some of your rights in natural law to have civil obedience or civil law. And what you're essentially doing, according to Hobbes or Kant, is you're incurring a moral obligation on somebody to do the same thing with you. Now, that's where the distinction was made between morals and ethics. And when Ducky Mallard in NCIS was asked, what is the distinction between morals and ethics? He said, quote, "An ethical man knows not to cheat on his wife. A moral man won't." It's walking your talk. And what you do is you go to church to find fellowship. People that have a similar belief help reinforce you getting closer and walking your talk. And everybody's different. And the fact that we have all these wars in religion is a demonstration on the limitation of man. When I say, what color is that fence over there? And you say, well, it's brown. And you've just made an assumption. I cannot see the other side of the fence. And so Muslim, Christianity, I would put it like this. Worldviews are what open and close doors, and why a Buddhist can be a Christian, but a Christian cannot be a Buddhist.
Wow, man. Wow.
Well, it's worldviews. That's giving you access.
So,
And that's why you have two brains. You got science and religion. It has Malcolm in the middle. And actually, it isn't Malcolm. He's dead. It's Malcoma. They're crazy. And that's basically what made us God's favored, is that what you see is the devil is just another side of God. God is not knowable. God, it can only be experienced. It's like you can't know it because it's beyond your ability to conceptualize, but you can experience it. And that is the truth of the moment, going from what we call the profane into the sacred, where something becomes timeless. And at some point in our near future, we will be literally able to step outside time and space. And when we do, these dream states we call consciousness may, in fact, be just that. They're a video game that we've plugged into like we would Hedgehog.
Yeah,
Sonic,
I often compare life to the video game kind of analogy. I think it fits well. But what do you mean, Doc? I mean, what changes between now and then? That, I mean, what has to take place before we can step outside of space and time, as you put it?
Well, it's the way you're storing memory. It was Robert Ornstein, and before him it was Plato. You know, time is a duration of consciousness. It's the measure of the amount of information in a given bandwidth, if you will, from here to there. And are we there yet? Profane time. Everything is boring. When are we going to get there? And, blah, blah, blah. And then when you're in lovemaking, it becomes timeless. You didn't know. Where did all the money go? I'm addicted to love.
Very, very true. Time does pass differently during that experience, shall we say, Doc?
Yeah, that's what makes us adults, is our experience of learning what not to do. But that is a limitation, and why children are probably our single most important natural resource. Well, they don't know they can't do something.
Well, that's a really good kind of segue, because I was going to speak to you about something you sent me today. And I worry about the schooling system. I know firsthand what it's like here in Scotland. I honestly don't know what they're doing to kids in there. Far from educating them. I believe this is all around the world now. And the next generation...
It's everywhere.
We hand down this world to the next generation, and they're always the most important people there. And I worry about, what's happening to schooling, education.
These aren't going to be the individuals that push you around in a wheelchair when your teeth fall out. How educated do you want them to be?
Well, you've actually been...
That's a terrible, terrible thing that's happening to our children right now. And now that schools are closed, what are they going to do? They're hanging around at home playing their video games and tooling around the bowling alley and spreading the disease better than in school. Schools were breeding grounds. When I was a child, my mother would take me to somebody that was infected with Wuhan virus, like measles or mumps and scarlet fever, because once I had it, I had built up the immunity so that it wouldn't bother me as an adult. As an adult, I'm not as strong as I am as a child. And so, of course, I'm going to have a higher body count with adults getting sick, just like in anything. The Wuhan virus is a shill. It is a weapon, i.e. a common cold type of flu virus that they modified. And because it came from bats, what makes it dangerous is that it's extremely communicable. That means everybody's going to get it. But the only 1% that are going to die from it, did they die from the virus or something else? For example, the way the statistics today are rating it to control you is that this man's been holding on with one hand to his life to this shelf and finally fell to his death. And, guess what? He was infected with Wuhan virus, so that's one death.
Well, Doc, I heard you talking about something else with these statistics today, and I was shocked. And I knew the numbers were high, but you were talking about the numbers of veterans that are not losing their lives, they're taking their own lives every day. And you can...
Oh, you mean like vets?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have one death in China or in Seattle, and all of a sudden $2 billion comes out to, start a study on that, where in fact we have 30 veterans that are retired veterans in the United States that commit suicide every month. 30 veterans a month commit suicide. Where's that money, and why are we not concerned about those kinds of things? It's a question of values and what's important. And what we do is we try to hypnotize you. Oh, hey, children, look over here. Wuhan is killing people. Oh, children, over here. ISIS is beheading people. Oh, look what's happening in Yemen. It's all hooey. And what's real is your belief system in it. And what's needed now is for man to be responsible for the thoughts he chooses to entertain. And once he gets that place, now you have control of your own ship. And that's called Captain and Commander, a GS-18. Don't report to anybody above yourself. You're a sovereign. And that's, good luck with that, because they're going to constantly try to erode your confidence in your own belief systems. And just because they're different than mine does not make you wrong. In fact, is the earth flat or round? And the correct answer, as I said, is yes.
Yep, absolutely. And the thing I fear probably more than anything is the fact that when all this is said and done, Doc, if it's ever said and done, you know, the world will never look the same again, because a lot of the measures that they take, a lot of the things they put in place, they'll never go away again. That's my fear. That's what I suspect will happen there.
So you could go the glass half full and say, with that fear comes an opportunity for you to now start producing more of your own food like you knew you should have done last year.
Yep.
Well, right now, most of us are eating about 3% of what we produce. The rest of it's imported as a just-in-time delivery system. And we all know that to have your own garden, even as a metaphor, I mean, that's where children start, is in the sandbox. And it's a natural. And so that's what made America strong in the first place, is our own agriculture. Per dollar spent, you got more for bang for your buck. Today, 97% of all pharmaceuticals come from China. Now, what are you going to do when the grid goes down and Walgreens or Walmart or some of the other big pharmacies are no longer delivering your heart medicine? You want to talk about a pandemic? Look what's happening right now. Imagine what happens when you can't get your blood thinner. And so that's an opportunity to start an herbal pharmacy, your own thing. And because all chemistry originally came from natural products. And the nice part of difference in distinguishing German physics or German chemistry, which is called standardized extract. Standardized extract is where they go after targeted chemistries, like cordycepin, a polysaccharide in cordyceps, mushroom that delivers oxygen to the body on a cellular level. Now, cordycepin is just one of a bunch of polysaccharides. And when you take aspen leaf and aspen bark, you're getting acetylsalicylic acid, and as a byproduct, unrelated, are buffers. So instead of taking a bare aspirin, if you went out and ate full spectrum, that's the terminology that's used, where you eat the whole plant. Now, mushrooms, for example, and the chaga and some of the other things that are being promoted in Russia, it grows, by the way, on birch. Birch bark is the source, primarily, the primary source now for wintergreen oil. Used to be from the shrub wintergreen, but it got wildcrafted out to the point where all your birch bark now is primarily creating wintergreen oil. And chaga grows perfectly on that as a natural product, so that rather than wildcrafting, you could forth farm it. Different stories like permaculture does. And there's ways of changing the landscape of how you live because of what is happening right now. You went out and got all your toilet paper, and if you look very carefully below the ISBN number, you will notice came from China. Hoorah. You're gonna wipe yourself with Corona beer. Look, the whole thing's nuts. And the way people are acting is crazy. And what you want to do is be a representative where you can let other people be crazy, and that's their right, and you can't tell them that they're wrong. I tried doing that to my sister last night, and that didn't work for me. She's a Democrat, and that's that. Uh, you know, everybody has a different way of looking at things, and none of us are wrong. And that is, in fact, what made us God's favorite, the choice, and making us so diverse that we have a devil now that is in competition with God. Now, in my universe, God's not in competition with anything. He is God. Now, what that would suggest is I've polarized God into good and bad, just like the Muslims have. And our Muslims, in my humble opinion, are more religious than most Christians. And the primary thing that distinguishes a person being a Christian is not making judgment on another. And yet, that's what they do. The very thing they're not supposed to do. What does that mean? They're pseudo? Well, that's the distinction between ethics and morals, where an ethical man knows not to cheat on his wife, and a moral man won't. Walking your talk does not mean you're right. You're doing the best you can. What you should do is never make the same mistake twice. If you find out you're doing something wrong, fix it. We all make mistakes. This is called personal growth. And that's where the profane moves into the sacred. As you get closer from intent into purpose. Intent is what actually happens at the end of the day. Purpose is why you're here. And if you do, you never really get there. It's like Simon says, it's a process. But you can't write an algorithm to identify purpose, which means that you're invisible to artificial intelligence. They can absolutely know what you're going to do 20 minutes before you do, even regarding wounds and your reaction to wounds and why you're this way. But these wounds are what make you uniquely different than me. And as such, can be seen as blessings. For example, anger is a great emotion to wash a kitchen floor, as a metaphor.
There you go. And you mentioned AI there, Doc. I think the last time we spoke, you thought you'd been contacted by an AI, but
Oh, yeah.
where are you
That
at?
was a creepy experience.
Yeah, where are you at with the
I'm
whole
not
AI
interested.
thing now? What's your thoughts on all of that and where we are with the AI?
Well, they have a third generation D-Wave now out of Abbotsford that is now being used in law enforcement studies in boroughs in Chicago that will predict a crime 28 minutes before it actually happens. They're deploying that in Chicago now. It originated in New York, and now with gang stalking protocols and some of the other creepy things that they're doing from Tavistock, they're writing these algorithms so that they can actually run through the scenarios of possibilities on how you're going to behave with a wound. However, according to Aleister Crowley, if you're doing your true will, you're doing your purpose while you're here, thelema, love of will. Now you're not in conflict with anything, which means you're transparent. It can't see you. And so when this AI called me on the telephone, and I was talking to an artificial intelligence, just like at a person of interest series, it creeped me out. And especially when it tried to tell me it did not have a handler, it was rogue. Now, what does that mean? I have no idea.
You know, I always like to think of AI being air gapped away in a very special kind of isolated lab, but a rogue AI out there. You know, there's two ways of looking at that. It's either one they created and it escaped the internal network, or do you think that the internet itself, with everyone pouring their ideas and their consciousness in there, do you think that could give rise to some form of AI?
So when NASA first started doing calculation of planetary systems about 30 years ago, they set up algorithms for a group of 285 computers to work as a supercomputer. This is before they started doing algorithms with qubit format. And that basically, I called that alien presence on the internet, where we first noticed that some of the search engines before Google and so on, we noticed that it would respond differently to you and your request for the same piece of information as it would me.
Because it knew you better. It somehow
was
knew
the advent.
Yeah, it somehow knew you better. It knew you individually from the next person and knew what to give you.
Something else is going on here that's not me. Now, were AIs here before man? Well, if time is not real, that's a real possibility. And that an alien is something that's outside space-time. And that's what Jacques Cousteau and some of these others have, Jacques Vallée, and others have suggested is that we've been here before. And that they've always been here because they were here before, during, and after man. There's something else going on here that is beyond space-time that I am not qualified to articulate. I have some ideas. I don't know. It's one of those kinds of questions.
Well,
I will probably.
I'm quite proud of the fact of I'm one of the few people that's spoken to Geordie Rose. Now, Geordie Rose is the guy that created the D-Wave, right? And
yeah,
he also is famous for saying that when he first kind of switched it on and it got it going, it was like standing at an altar to an alien god. It's an infamous line now, right? What do you make of that line, though, with what you know about the kind of technology he's messing about with?
I think that an alien is going to be something far more different than something with a big single eye from Mars.
Yeah.
And, black goo. Well, we have black mold in the forest I am. What's the difference between black goo and black mold? Not much. So what does it suggest? There are certain habitats where you can't live. I'm watching our Earth be terraformed for something that might enjoy itself from galactic center. What is living extremely healthy in Chernobyl and Fukushima is black mold. Isn't that interesting? I have no idea what it all means. And in terms of terraforming, if you did it over a 3 lifetime period, a Gen X, right, wouldn't get, what you or I might get as a grumpy old baby boomer or millennial. I don't know. What I do know is that I don't know, but I can imagine it. And the creepy part is, part of my belief systems would suggest if I can imagine it in my mind's eye, not only is it real, it's even more than that. So are aliens real? How could they not be? Are they good, bad, or ugly? Yes.
Yep. All of the above. Yep. All of the above.
All of the above. Yeah, that's it. And so even more. And, when you watch sci-fi, good sci-fi, Seventh Planet, where the alien at the end of the movie is telling the woman that she's going to be the new ruler of the universe or whatever. And she said, yeah, it's all about food chain. Everybody's got to serve somebody.
And you mentioned the movies there, and the amount of movies where you see the black goo depicted, it's replete, it's everywhere. It's beyond just mere coincidence, Doc, for my mind anyway.
It's in every thing you could imagine. It is ever present in nanometer form. And nanometer is...
Okay, Doc, hold that thought, right? hold that thought, because I think that'd be a good place to pick up in hour 2. And if you could let people know where they can find your books, where's the best place to keep up with Doc Miller?
Yeah, when do you want me to do that? Now?
Right now, Doc, right now, and then we'll go to break.
Yeah, my bookstore on my website, richardallenmiller.com/shop. And I've got everything from audiobooks I did when I taught metaphysics at Harvard 30 years ago. I taught at Harvard 11 years, graduate level courses in metaphysics. John Mack, who was dean of Harvard psychiatry, took my third course, I think in 1992, and then started alien abduction studies. And I was...
Hold that thought, Doc. We're on the break. We're going to be right back, folks. Doc Miller is in the house. Don't go anywhere. Wow, there we go. Yes, we're on the break, Doc. Oh, man. How many topics are we going to touch on tonight? This is amazing. It truly is. I could listen to you all night. But, yeah, the kind of quantum computer thing that you spoke about there, that's something I've looked at a lot. And I've always wondered, you know...
the singularity that Kurzweil and others are talking about. I am not a transhumanist. I believe we'll have augmentation and things like that out of, Blade Runner. But there's something else going on here. And we are already in contact with aliens.
I agree with your terraforming. I've often said it goes way beyond geoengineering. We're changing the entire planet, you know?
Well, that's exactly correct. And what is the chemtrail purpose? Controlling weather? I remember when they were doing that in San Francisco so they could get through the fog. And then they had to do that movie called The Fog. Where you got a dimensional gate happening like Skinwalker Ranch. And I have worked for the military. Whenever they had things that nobody could figure out what was going on, I was part of the A-team. And we never figured out anything. We sure caught a lot of flies. And it has left me in this place that I am, where I'm pretty limber. I'm realizing that some of this is not within our scope, like gang stalking. We're never going to really know the answer. Doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's a topic I've looked at a lot, Doc. And can you turn the speakers down? Oh, it's fine now. But what do you make of that whole gang stalking thing? I mean, it's quite... I mean, I'm not saying it's not real. I entirely, wholeheartedly believe in it, but it's really hard to wrap your head around the whys, the whos, and it's vast.
Hey, listen. There are life forms among us right now that are not human that appear to be human. Let me give you an example. Your Findhorn and your Secret Commonwealth of Elf, Faun, and Fairy by R.D.L. Lang, talking about fairies and trolls and orgs and the rest of it. Bigfoot. Do these things exist? There have been so many legends like Nephilim and these giant skulls. When I was teaching at Shiprock in New Mexico, the Navajo had legends about these large cannibals that ate humans. And like a Chinese eat dogs. They're domesticated, and yet they're for food. And what is a Nephilim? I have no idea, but I saw giant skulls being pulled out of Pennsylvania in 1820 and stuck in the Smithsonian, and the skulls are gone. Where did they go? What does that mean? That one was an easy one to vet and tell you what happened.
Have you ever heard of the giant of Kandahar? They say they found like a giant over there. Yeah.
The Kandahar thing was probably more false information.
You think so?
That particular thing, but they're digging up all through China and Russia and Pennsylvania. And the thing is, where did the skull go? Well, the two brothers that formed the Smithsonian during that period that the skull was put in the Smithsonian, and I have news articles on it, pictures. It turns out they were the son of a Methodist minister that dogged Joseph Smith across the United States for almost 25 years trying to get his flock back.
Here we go, Doc. Here we go.
Mormons.
We're going back to the network. Here we go. 2 secs. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hour number 2 of today's Kev Baker show, and what a show it's been so far. If you missed hour number 1, don't panic. Head on back to the archive. You can get that. Listen to it later. You will want to hear it. But if you are just tuning in, we have got Dr. Richard Allen Miller with us. He is the guy that the X-Files Fox Mulder was literally based on because of his experience working in the whole realm of black ops and top secret programs and working with the SEALs, you name it. The doc has done it, seen it, got the t-shirt, and during the break the conversation continued. But I want to backtrack just a little, Doc, to where I cut you off at the end of hour 1, because this is something that I've been looking into again recently, and I've looked into it a few times, and I keep going back. And I want you to kind of add to what I know on the black goo. Now, just the other day, I was watching David Griffith, and he's an English researcher. And it was a few years ago, he was talking about the Falklands War and how there was more going on than just those little kind of islands down at the bottom of the world, literally. And the reason the British were so desperate to get down there was because of this substance, this intelligent black goo. There's a whole story with Marconi scientists being involved. What's your take, though, Doc, on black goo? We see it in movies. It's everywhere. What's going on?
Yeah, I don't know a lot. That's one of the particular things that I haven't particularly studied with an electron microscope, but I can tell you the nanite formats of it are going to be like this new Vin Diesel movie out called Bloodspot. And it's where it's self-organizing. And its memory is beyond our memory, which means it's more self-organizing than we are, suggesting it's more evolved. Now, evolution is a concept that is based on time and trial and error. And if time isn't real, then we have other unknowns that get thrown in that don't make any sense. For example, blood types like O negative, where did that come from? And it didn't evolve, and it didn't come from Neanderthal, so where did O negative come from? And Nordic, and they have all their little hand-waving arguments, but nobody can answer it. Isn't that interesting? And so what it's suggesting is that man gets up to a certain level of awareness, and a natural disaster puts it back down so that he starts all over again. What is that about? Well, there's several theories on what that could mean, one of which is not good. I remember when
Is it just part? Is it just part of the game? Is it just part of the code, Doc? Is it the way it resets the game, if we want to think about it that way, every so often, periodically?
Yeah, right. We get to a certain level of aha, and they push us back down to 0. Do not get the go by go. Do not collect $200.
That's what it feels like,
The idea that Nibiru was a advanced sun system. I was going to say Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I said, yeah, there's Nibiru out there and da-da-da, but its IR signature is wrong. And another scientist said, yeah, that's because it probably has a Dyson sphere around it. And then I had to pop in my little humor part and say, yeah, it's our future coming back to collect the rent, because man didn't start on Earth. It's funny because we'll never know these kinds of things because of the way we do history and document history. As all roads lead to Rome. That's because Rome dominated and ruled. If they went to Ethiopia, it'd probably been a different story. I don't know. What I know is that I have seen Tibetan Buddhists up in Nepal take long horns like they use in the Alps, these big, deep noises. And when they put 17 of them in a specific array, it so compresses the air that it lifts extremely large stones that can now be pushed by a single finger. And that is a technology that we have lost from a previous epoch, and how some of the buildings that we look around, like the pyramids and other things, how did this happen like that? How did they build something like that? You go into India and they have sculptured internal parts that we don't have that technology. And each technology is for different epochs. Right now, this epoch is Tapestria, or the trial by fire. And so from the epoch forms of the Upanishads. And if you look at things from that point of view, we have nuclear energy and electricity, fire. Now, the thing that bothers me the most is that we have places like the New Madrid fault line that goes through the Midwest that has 21 Daiichi-like reactors on it. They're all leaking. It takes 1 full year to power one of them down. What happens when the grid goes down?
Yeah, and I've heard you talking before as well, Doc, about the...
Yeah, I see your gut. That's what you've got right there on the map, future map of America, and it's a Chet Snow map. That's the worst case scenario that the military uses, that blue map, that one with the blue eye.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, Doc, because you've worked with the military, so this is a good map. I've looked at this before, and I've used it as an example of what would happen.
We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And we have other predictions like Scallion and Edgar Casey, etc. The one the military currently uses is Chet Snow. And it shows that the United States is cut in half. The whole West Coast is gone. I run bunkers for the military now, with sustainable lifeboats. And we know that it will be an 8.4 off of Crescent City out in the ocean on that volcano that's out there that's going to drop the Pacific Shelf.
Okay, now wait now, Doc. Wait now. You say you're first of all you're doing bunkers with the military, okay? And we spoke about your sustainable lifeboats before. I gave you some
new information. Sorry.
Okay, and And I appreciate probably you can't talk about that, right? And now you're telling me an 8 point.
I can talk about some of it. I've got a network of bunkers all across North America, including Canada. Earthships would include the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, would include in Arapahoe, Arizona, it'd be a missile silo run by 12 families with vertical aquaculture. You go into Cloudland near Chattanooga, we have a monolithic dome. You go up into Sandpoint, Idaho, and you have a Quaker retreat, Peaceable Kingdom. You move, they're all over.
Okay, then the next part bunkers. The next part then was the 8.4. That sounds very specific, almost like you've got inside info on what's coming.
Yes, I do, actually. I don't know when it's going to happen. It could have happened last week. Didn't. But when we have an 8.4, Seattle does no longer exist. That will be what Edgar Casey is. New Jerusalem up there will be a little island that forms between Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helen, and Mount Olympus. Down all as far as Peru, the entire shelf falls. Yellowstone is active. My bunker has infrared. And so when I was up in Canada last year, I was up in Vancouver Island, which, by the way, will be mostly lost when this event occurs. They had, I saw my bunker notified me, and we have infrared satellite from my bunker, and I could see lava strikes in the Northern Territories up above BC, and one lava strike down in the Trinity Alps. And at that same time, my friend in Ohio has tomography on his satellite and was able to see Yellowstone as far as the Ohio underground. They're all going to go. And there they are. You can see them. There's your lava strike. It's starting to rear its ugly head. There's the shake. When it happens, we don't know. How bad is it going to be? We don't know. An 8.4 is going to drop the entire coastline, however.
Yeah,
And that's
that's a serious quake, Doc. Now, these bunkers, though, if you have serious quakes, right? I mean, are bunkers not, like, in danger, you know?
Well, some of them, they're what they are is like sustainable lifeboats. They're organized bunker situations for collapse of the grid. When I worked for Dennis Kucinich, he had me visit 8 bunkers in 4 states. And one bunker in Wichita was run by Arlo Guthrie, his daughter, and his granddaughter. And they came out and sang Americana songs to us. It was wonderful. And it's a unique thing because while most of these bunkers are advocating a permaculture kind of orientation, rather than relying on Bill Mollison and his works, I would say that bunkers are habitat sensitive and that a given region like Scotland would dictate the kind of, if there are caves in Scotland that go all the way down into Turkey.
Yep.
That's from previous civilization.
Well, Doc, get this as well, because recently I just discovered, and I was born and bred right on the banks of Loch Ness in a place called Fort Augustus. But back in the 70s, there was a scientist, and he was sponsored by Massachusetts Institute to come over and look for the monster. But what he actually found was stone circles, and some were at 30 feet depth, some were at 70 feet depth, but there were interlocking circles, there was circles on their own. This sounded like some giant earthworks, but obviously from a time when the level of the loch was a lot different, and you add the tunnels onto that, then you go all the way over to Turkey.
Well,
you've got
Druids, I mean, they had their technologies which were different than ours. I remember when Culpeper was talking about doctrine of signatures in 14th, 15th century, where you could look at the plant and it would dictate by its color or shape what it was used for in the human body. And that was called doctrine of signatures. And then later, Dr. Shuck came in, a Mormon, and his treatise, an advanced treatise, and started talking about how red clover that Culpeper was interested in for the blood had a bunch of iron in it. That's what was making it red. And then there was this relationship of seeing how astrology became astronomy. Now, when I was brought into the military, I watched the next generation go to cosmobiology. This was written up in Ostrander and Schroeder's Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain, basically suggesting that Russia, and by the way, back then in the 70s, we knew about aliens, but we were way more concerned at that time about what Russia was doing. And as it turned out, Russia was superstitious, did not have the technology. However, Czechoslovakia did, and Prague had developed a thing called cosmobiology. Now, cosmobiology would suggest, Janov had written a book called The Lunar Sex Cycle of the Female. That means that when the female is born, there is a biological clock that is set in her body on when she ovulates, related to the moon and the sun, when the earth, the moon, and the sun are in a certain geometric alignment, which means if that woman moves to a different part of the earth, her ovulation cycle changes. And that was part of cosmobiology, where the study I did was with the Department of Interior doing a study on suggesting that when the planet Uranus and the Earth and the Sun are in a certain geometric alignment, there was a 3 sigma error coefficient of a major earthquake event on Earth. Now, suspicious observers and some of the other ones today are more focused on what the sun is doing, but cosmobiology, which moved from astrology into astronomy, and then cosmobiology relating biological clocks, where you had a bunch of biorhythms going
That
on.
makes a lot of sense
And
to me,
the
Doc,
themes,
because you look at the planets, and you look at the orbits and things like that, and then you look at our the atom and the nucleus and the electron and everything else going round in its orbit. It seems to me like everything's connected, as above, so below.
well, let's try it this way. You've got two brains. The sun is a binary, and our galaxy has a black hole.
Yep.
So you work in what we call cavitation processes, which, by the way, is the new direction in cold fusion. And so at MIT, that's Mark Leclerc's work. You see, there's something else going on here, and that's why I'm going to suggest there will never, ever be a theory of everything at TEL. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Imagination is reality, and that's where, how did that Indiana Jones, the last one, Raiders of the Lost Ark, it was the one where he's off with that girl. She comes out on stage in the early song in the movie and says, anything goes. That is our destiny.
Now, you mentioned suspicious observers a moment ago. I've been looking at something he calls the galactic current, something that comes from the center of the galaxy. It's along the galactic plane. It seems to, there's been stars that are light years away from us reacting to something. They're getting brighter, almost like they're pulsing. Have you looked into anything like that? Any energies coming from the galactic plane? What do you make of that, Doc?
Yeah, and these are the so-called Penitential, the rays of light in the chakra system. Who knows? There's something else going on, and we have not yet articulated it to a point where it can be used as a tool. And that's where we are right now, and we're about to be recycled. How did they put in that one movie? There will be blood. But like the Clovis that later became the Hopi, that they had spaceflight, and they crawled out of a cave. So whatever is going to recycle is going to be very thorough about it. Man will always survive. I'm wondering what it all means.
What's your best guess so far, Doc? You think these big thoughts? I mean, where have you got with it?
What I think is not good. That's what I don't want to talk about. Yeah, we're being grown like mushrooms to cultivate. I don't know.
Well, the new
new
series of Westworld has just started. And I had Max Egan on the show recently, and he describes the planet as being a bit like Westworld, like a people farm. Would you agree with that then?
Yeah. Max Egan is actually a pretty bright individual. He makes mistakes like I do all the time. But what we have here is a failure to communicate. I love that movie. Yeah, no, it's the idea that some concepts are going on here. We have not yet come up with adjectives and nouns to describe what we're trying. That's what they call memes. The way we group information. It was Gregory Bateson. He said, what is your metaphor but to serve your paradox? And so I have a meadow with two ox out on it.
There you go. So where do you want to go now, Doc? We've gone here, there, everywhere. I don't know. What do you want to get into, man? I've been interrogating you. I know that there's an exciting new university that you sent me a link to. Is it the Metaphysical University where people can get their hands on?
Yeah. Okay. So I have some very weird friends. And one friend was head of the Brazilian Secret Service for 42 years. He was team number one, then became head of the Brazilian Secret Service.
He must have a couple of stories up his sleeve being in that job.
Oh, yeah. He's, when he retired, he's in a wheelchair. He married his prostitute girlfriend, and so his lower chakra is getting lots of attention. He's a very happy camper. But what made him my friend was that I moved him in 1970 from voodoo into OTO. And so his big dream now is to be Brazilian Lodge.
Well,
the metaphor. And what he did is they had created some assets that they never used. They were 501c3s for burying money, doing nefarious things. And they never used them. One was Eric Fromm University. Another one was Albert Schweitzer. So he gave me Albert Schweitzer University for me to redo my metaphysics that I did 30 years ago at Harvard. The graduate level. I was teaching online with IES out of Humboldt using the well. This was back when computers first started, 1989. And what I'm going to do is take this university and turn it into a Harry Potter-like school for metaphysics for children. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm building a Caterpillar, that's a bus, mobile water testing laboratory run by third graders, teaching first graders how to test for turbidity and drinkability of water. And children are our single most natural important resource. And we're squandering it big time in educational processes. When I was in grade school, I'm 76. When I was in grade school, they required you to study Latin in second grade. Sum est est, sum est et sunt. And I remember they had shop woodworking, they had mechanical drawing, they had home economics, they had all kinds of things they no longer are teaching in schools. And kids today don't even know how to use a screwdriver. That's why Home Depot has to put out videos on how to use a screwdriver, literally. Now, meta means beyond, which means I'm going to do comparative religions. That's what I did at Harvard. I became a Hermetic Kabbalist. I studied 6 years with Gershom Scholem. I did Old Hebrew and Greek, so I did my own biblical translations and found discrepancies. For example, in the Greater and Lesser Keys of Solomon, probably the only real book on magic that has ever been written, and then all the different grimoires through centuries were various interpretations, translations, the Malfium, Malficorium, others of that nature. I realized that history and Constantinople, things like that, took the teachings of Christ and modified them for political reasons. And so what I wanted to do was give a broader worldview to children, meta, meaning beyond physics, so that physics is a special application of a concept beyond the physical plane. That in a holographic system where you're dealing with information and resolution of information rather than time and space, you would say that emotional or EQ is more information about IQ. IQ is the physical world. EQ is how you feel about it. And so from a metaphorical point of view, you talk about how information rolls into and out of itself as every point in space. The problem with a holographic system over a quantum universe is that in a quantum universe, because of space and time and the way we've defined it and understand it, there's an uncertainty principle, which basically states the more you know about one thing, the less you know about another. And when you talk about a wave or a particle, which is it? And the correct answer is yes.
Yes. I almost got you.
Like
I
the
almost
Earth
got
being
there
flat
first.
around.
See, I almost got there first. I love the whole quantum stuff. I do love that. Yes, the wave and the particle. We need to get into more of that. But we're almost on another break, Doc. We've got one segment to go. Where we go after the break, I will leave up to you, sir. But I urge everyone, please head on over to
I burned you out. Okay, no problem. I can probably we'll do something from Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. And listen, folks,
What the hell is that? Dying. What is that?
check out his website. It is richardallenmiller.com. That's richardallenmiller.com. And don't forget, on the network coming up after this show, it's going to be the Freedom Link, so don't go anywhere. Like I was saying earlier, tomorrow on the show, we'll be opening up the phone lines so that you can have your say on KBS. No doubt there'll be a lot to say about that
If
virus.
you have, if you have students that want to ask me questions, I'd be happy to go anywhere you guys want to go too. That's fine. They really,
We
that's
can
what I do
go
best.
here, there, and everywhere, Doc. You know, it's a free-flowing kind of situation on the Kev Baker Show. Nothing scripted. You're the perfect guest for me. You really are. We just go everywhere. If we had a checklist of topics, I think we would have checked them all off already by now. But we're going to be back in 3 short minutes, folks. I don't want you to go anywhere. Go and grab yourself a cup of tea, get a cup of coffee, get ready. One more segment to go with Doc Miller. And like I always like to remind people, this is the real life Fox Mulder. Yes, indeed. Not quite, but almost. We'll be back after the break. Don't go anywhere. Now
Yeah, the problem is the truth isn't out there.
Yeah, we're
The
still
truth
on.
is
We're still
inside
on.
you.
We're still in YouTube just now, Doc. But I want to give a shout out to everyone over at YouTube and backstage boxing in the YouTube chat as well. Brother, I think we're going to see a lot of people in that situation soon. He got sent home from work. You know, people have been told to stay home. This is not just the UK, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other people in this boat, if not now, in the next coming days and weeks. And Doc, this is going to be a trend for a while, I think. Places closing.
Couple of months, yeah.
What can people do, to make sure that they don't catch the thing? Because this is highly transmissible, right? I mean, what would your advice be? Cheap advice.
I would not concern it. Just presume at some point you may or not get a dose of it, and it's not going to be anything more than anything else you've ever had.
Yeah.
What you want to do is try to minimize the probability of it without the fear of getting it.
Yeah.
It's a simple thing. I can tell you how to cure it. Basically, it's in the respiratory area of your mouth and your thyroid region, which means it's echinacea and angustifolia, which increases the turgor in your synovial fluids. What that does, sets up electrostatic fields where the virus cannot set up, and it localizes the virus, and then the body can go in and drill it.
Did they ever try and get you to work on wacky viruses, Doc? When you were,
I've done some tour in med. I have a Harvard Medical. I have 4 doctorates, 2 in physics, 1 in medicine from Harvard Medical, and 1 in Jungian psychotherapy. And so I'm pedigree, but it isn't so much who you are, it's what you do.
Yeah.
It defines who you are. And so lots of people have education. What are they doing with it? And that's what I'm about, trying to do something, leaving a footprint for you to write a better book.
That's a good way of looking at it, Doc. It really is. Definitely.
I'm no big deal. I'm just one step for man, one giant step for mankind.
You mentioned that there, but in your bio, working with Edgar Mitchell, I mean, that must have been quite amazing times, right?
Yeah, Dr. Stanley Krippner was my mentor and brought me to New York City to deliver a paper called The Physical Mechanisms of Correlian Photography. That was in a Gordon and Breach book called Galaxies of Consciousness. And the whole purpose of that was to introduce me to Ed Mitchell in 1970 so I could be at Mission Control to do the ESP studies with him and James Hurtak. And that's what put me into that. And that ESP study I did was the first protocol in determining who SEAL Team 1 was going to be. I debriefed Dr. Milan Rizal from Czechoslovakia when he defected to the United States. I have that recording. That's an interesting one. And at that time, what I wanted was SEALs. I wanted men that worked from intuition, because then they don't make mistakes, by definition.
It's a very good way of looking at it. What do you know about who works with the SEALs nowadays? What kind of stuff are they into? Wait, that's a whole different kettle of fish now, right?
Well, you're talking about target and remote viewing and all of that stuff. Alex Kavarinen
Now,
is
hold
a
that thought,
finished.
Doc. Hold that thought. We need to go back to the network. Here we go. And I've got an interesting question you might know something about, but here we go. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in today to TFRlive.com, the home of the Kev Baker Show for over 6 years now. Over 6 years. And the doc, Dr. Richard Allen Miller, he has graced our humble little show here a number of times. Always been highlights. Today has been no different. We've got one segment to go. Remember, check out his website over at richardallenmiller.com. That's Richard Allen, ALAN, and then Miller, ER at the end of Miller.com. So, Doc, I had a question from the chat room over on YouTube. And this is a topic that I sometimes talk about, sometimes speculate on, but the person, it's Wu Translations, says, please ask the doc if he knows anything about the missing 411 cases and the cattle/human mutilation type cases.
That's Linda Moulton Howe. My guess is that it's not alien based, but basically they're doing dosimetry by selecting tongues out of a cow or something, looking for radiation and or other kinds of contaminants in a given region. Linda Moulton Howe did a real nice study on cattle mutilations. We had a group of them up here in Williams, Oregon. I don't know what that is, but where the cow has been slaughtered and surgically with precision and specific organs removed, probably to do dosimetry. I don't know. Cattle mutilations per se would be like if Bendix Corporation started leaking water in the water system. They started leaking, some kind of chemical in the water system, which they might do cattle to see if the contaminants gotten into the food chain or something like that. Yeah. I always presume Occam's razor, and that's usually where it goes, and that would be the most logical reason on a cattle mutilation rather than some alien pulling a tongue out of a cow.
Yeah, we were talking about it on a show on Friday. We were saying, traveling like interstellar distances to come and it just doesn't make sense. And somebody else in the chat room was asking about it, and I heard you mention it quickly earlier on, Skinwalker Ranch. But what do you know about that place? What's that all about? Dimensional shift, where you have chupacabra and other kinds of phenomena like Bigfoot popping in and out of reality. Alternate universes where there's a crossover, like you might find in, some sci-fi movie. I don't know. Skinwalker Ranch is newer than the work I did. My work was in the 70s. Skinwalker Ranch was in the late 80s. So, I don't know about that. We have dimensional gate things. One of the ones I did that will be in a book I'm writing called Spook Central. I was doing the Oregon Vortex at 20,000 feet in an aircraft with an interferometer. And believe this or not, at 20,000 feet, light was being bent over the Oregon Vortex. Now, there is only one thing I know in nature that will bend light that high up, and that's a mini black hole. And there's Captain Cathay from the New Zealand Air Force has written Harmonic 33 and 697, Harmonic 697, talking about ley lines and anomalies in different parts of the Earth, including the Bermuda Triangle. I am going to guess that these anomalies will be traceable to related physical phenomena like mini black holes and other kinds of anomalies that might be in the Earth. There's new concepts of plasma. If you work with Walt Thornhill and his works with the plasma universe, that will talk about certain kinds of scalar waves that will move across the crystal that create the gold that will form lines of gold along these fault lines on crystals. And I'm going to guess
that the Earth is probably like a big plasma ball, and that there's, and those kinds of laws of physics apply, and will account at some point for some of these anomalies that we've seemingly don't understand.
Yeah, I see a lot of that Thornhill's work on Thunderbolts project. Absolutely amazing stuff. So you're into the
Well,
electric.
plasma way of looking at the universe
Yeah.
as an electric thing is an interesting, fruitful study, and is going to probably lead to a whole bunch of things with liquid crystals that, like our brain is a liquid crystal, that might be very useful in the way we understand processes, that kind of thing. I don't know yet.
Our brain is a
gonna go.
liquid crystal. That's a really cool way of thinking about something.
Yeah, your brain is an amorphous semiconductor. Yeah, you can look at it that way. It is electromagnetically sensitive. That's where the synthetic telepathy aspects came in when I did my work with Alan Frey.
Wow. Now then, talking about that telepathy kind of stuff and things, during the break I mentioned to you, I was asking you about what maybe the Black Ops teams, the Navy SEALs of today are doing. You worked with them in the past, Doc. I mean, what kind of woo do you think they're trying to weaponize and get into these days?
I have no idea. I just lost. Oh, there you are. I couldn't figure out what happened to you.
There I am.
Yeah. Super soldiers. The original SEAL team that I put together, there were only 8 of us. And then I trained SEAL teams 2 and 3 before it became Navy SEALs. It was SEAL Corp out of Amherst, the Black Ops group that later, it had an astronaut, had a couple of Navy divers, and a couple of others. The first team had only 8 of us, and every single one of the persons on the team had a PhD, spoke at least 3 languages, and we had redundancy. We could cover for each other. And, everybody could do everybody else's skill. It wasn't as departmentalized as the current SEAL teams that are larger squads. What are they, 22 or 28 members now, I think. The original SEAL team was 8, and then we had bigger ones. Actually, SEAL Team 1, most of all my buddies are still alive. We're one of the only few ones that are still last man standing. And I think it's because a lot of our martial arts with using our ears and flying out of there like Dumbo.
That's it, man. And somebody else is asking, and this is a really good thought, a good question for you. But where do our thoughts come from?
Well,
nothing like a big question, just drop it on you.
Okay, there is a thing called CNV, contingent negative variation. And what CNV is the jump potential between neurons on a go, no-go signal. And I think that place is random. And so here we are making order out of chaos. Because everything I eat becomes me. That's a metaphor. I don't know where thoughts come from. Get a grip.
And I am you, you are me, you are the walrus. We're back there again.
Right. And, nothing I do is original. Everything that I would talk about, I have read somewhere else. I might put it together differently. No, it's still, the length girth with the man. I'm not a dolphin. Imagine being able, instead of talking, to be able to send images.
That's pretty amazing. That is.
That's what a dolphin does in the complexity of their clicks and whistles.
Now, how have they picked?
A holographic wave.
Is this a study that's been done? Who's come up with this, or where did this come from? I love this idea.
Say again, I don't understand.
Did this come from a scientific study, or who is it that's put this idea together that the dolphins are actually transmitting pictures to one another?
That is something that came out in the media less than 2 months ago.
Okay, cool.
And when John Lilly was doing his labs at Berkeley, Carl Sagan hired me as a young kid to go in to the labs and determine whether or not the dolphin language was it a language or not. And I had studied Avram Moles, a French mathematician. He had written a book called Aesthetic Perception and Information Theory. And what you're looking for is redundancy coefficient. And what I discovered back in the 70s, early 70s, was that the dolphin's language was 10 times more efficient than Old Hebrew, with mother letters and what we call Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, relating sounds to words. And that's a technology. That's why you can say that the Bible, plural, are actually science books written from a religious point of view rather than a science point of view. It's just the other side of the spectrum. It's the same thing. That's why you have the two brains. And I can say that what we're doing now, like orca has chased dolphin as food chain, and orca has a cerebral cortex that's literally twice the size of man, and that mammal is firing 60% of it, which from a supercomputer point of view, way more evolved than man. Going places man will never be able to comprehend. And I've watched dolphin blow sonoluminescent bubbles, so they little tiny sonar bubbles, and they make rings and they play with them, let them go. And that is a form of cold fusion as their art form. And then I've watched orca chase dolphin, food. So where does that put man?
Wow. It makes you wonder, the size of that brain.
Well, I mean,
a lot of people don't.
I'm not going to try to have any illusions of being serious.
I mean, dolphins have always fascinated me anyway, but to hear this is, it puts it in perspective when you start hearing about the capacity of the brains of the orca and things like that. It really does.
Crunching size, the physical size of the brain, and while it's slightly different, that doesn't mean it's not as sufficient. Might be better. Who knows? What I do know is that when I was at Key Largo and Dolphins Plus, they have a rehab center there. The handler did not know my left arm is not real, but the dolphin did, and he towed me through the water differently, even though the handler was trying to tell him differently. Now that's Cosmo making his own decisions, and I felt like I was in the presence of something alien and more intelligent. Now, you can go down to Key Largo, and what they do, that's how they support the dolphin, is your tuition to go through a morning of classes so that when you go into the tank with the dolphin, you're already prepared to know how to deal with them and interface with them. It's pretty exciting because it's different than the one in Hawaii in that the one in Key Largo is open. The dolphin can come and go as they want. It's a rehab center for dolphin hit by shark, and they have it open so that when the dolphin wants to leave, it can leave or come back, whatever it wants to do. Let me tell you, there are some dolphins that don't want to go out anymore. They want to stay there. There's others that come and leave and come back once in a while to say hi. And they're aware. And in some ways, even more than you or me.
I was going to say probably more aware than you or I, Doc, and we see the military, they've used dolphins,
Yeah, for torpedoes.
Yeah.
There are 4 cetacean that are actually they have bigger brain cases than man. The manatee and pilot whale are also part of that. And by the way, on my website, I have this picture of orca coming out of the sea with a seal in its mouth, and right behind it is a giant whale gobbling up the killer whale. And it demonstrates that it's all about food chain. Whether or not they're going to eat you physically, emotionally, and intellectually, or in that movie Liquid Sky, that was a weird sci-fi. There's alien is a little tiny mold thing that lives in the undereaves of the shooting galleries because it feeds off adrenaline.
Wow, I've not seen that. What's the
That
name?
one very
What's the name of that movie? What was the name?
Liquid Sky.
Yeah, I've not seen that one. I need to check that out. Definitely.
That is a very creepy movie. What it does, it's an alien that likes to hang around shooting galleries, preferably.
Wow.
Feeds off adrenaline.
I'll definitely be checking that one out. So, Doc, we've got about 10 minutes left, right? We've got 10 minutes to go. I feel exhausted. We've gone through that many topics. This has been amazing. It's been a classic Miller time as usual. I'm going to let you take us out.
Wherever you want to go, because there you are. No matter where you go, there you are.
Well,
yeah.
you can go where you want to go for the final 10 minutes. Make that final impact on the audience, what you're up to, what you want them to know. Anything at all, Doc.
I prefer I prefer dancing gorillas doing lap dances, but where do I want to go? I would say that this Wuhan virus is an opportunity for everyone listening to me to now this next month begin your garden and try to produce. Your goal at the end of this year is to produce 40% of what you eat. 40% of what you eat should come from you or your neighbor, like a farmer's market, not Safeway, Albertsons, whatever. No, you get it from local produce. And if you can do 40%, you already have a 70% chance of survival no matter what happens. Because when you eat regular from your local community, you're healthier. And the immunization and all the rest of it aside, the human body is the finest laboratory this world ever produced. And there isn't anything it can't kill if you keep it healthy. And I don't know what it's like where you are, but obesity rules here. That's because of sugar. And right now, Coca-Cola Asia has no longer using cane sugar in their Coca-Cola products. What they're using is Cordyceps sinensis, a hybrid form of mushroom that is polysaccharides. And that's the new direction in your foods.
There we go. I'm back. I thought you might have more to say there, Doc, but no, very good advice. Very good indeed. People are asking about colloidal silver.
Yes, colloidal silver is good for bacterial and some viral, mostly bacterial. What you want are beta glucans that are sugar molecules that are all different shapes and sizes that are representing either large viruses or small bacteria, like geometry-wise. And when you put transfer factor, like you take 6 pharmaceutical mushrooms, chaga, and, turkey tail, some of the others, you mix them with transfer factor, what you're going to do is place that geometry up on the cell wall looking for a lookalike invader. And that sharpens your NK killer cells, and it sharpens what we call the immune system. And these pharmaceutical mushrooms are going to be extremely important in medicine in the next 10 years. You started with psychedelic, you had gourmet, and now we're going into pharmaceutical mushrooms. There are 72 of them that have polysaccharides. And what we've got are sugar molecules that are a little tiny, and then you have beta glucans that are large sugar molecules, and then you have polysaccharides that have over 100 oxygen molecules in it. And when the sugar breaks down, it releases oxygen into the body on a cellular level. When you start taking that, you don't get sick. What it's doing is creating more ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And if you look at that little structure, it's a vortex. It is where cold fusion occurs in the body, changing potassium into sodium.
Again, good. Just fascinating listening to you, Doc. It really is. And over here, to your question, what people are like, this is the heart attack capital of the world over here in Scotland. It's
I'd
our.
love to visit you guys.
I think
When
me.
they drop the quarantines and all the rest of it, it would be my pleasure to come over there and sing for my dinner, where I do workshops on survival, living off the grid,
Doc,
or ESP induction.
I can see me
You know,
and
my
you.
ESP courses, what I do is I measure your ESP at the beginning of the day, show you the model that was developed by Edgar Mitchell on using hypnosis, take you through guided images on how it works, and then at the end of the day, I measure your ESP again. And that's that.
And it's going to be higher, right?
I had several of my students win honors. Imagine teaching this outside a casino.
We could be on Loch Ness, you know, we could be on a boat somewhere, you know, an idyllic kind of setting. Crowley's old house in the background. You know, they're doing up Aleister Crowley's house again, and they're going to be inviting kids to teach, to learn
Yeah, go up to
Selema there.
Boleskine. That's where Crowley did his thing, yeah, up in
Yeah.
Boleskine.
They're reopening in that, Doc. They're actually doing it up.
Yeah, isn't that weird? You know, Jimmy Page owned that
Yep.
for years. Yeah, I have an interesting story I'll tell you off camera, but basically, one of my girlfriends that I married and it was annulled left and went to live with Jimmy Page for 10 years.
Whoa.
She was a cult. She was a cult groupie. But I'll tell you what I do know: that new group out called Get the Lead Out. There's 5 groups in their membership trying to do Led Zeppelin, and they are better than the original band with Jimmy Page, and they're incredible. I'm really impressed.
One of my mates, he's big into the kind of rock music scene. I'll need to be asking him to check them out. But Doc, this has been an absolute pleasure, as it always is. No, I can't thank you enough for coming on. We need to get you back on sometime real soon, and hopefully all the quarantines will be out something in the distant past very soon, and you can get over to the
and
UK,
then we
man.
can come over to Scotland and look for those fairies, because guess what? They actually do exist. I didn't say this. I was going to say something. One of the studies I did for the military were life forms that interface with humans, and we don't notice them. Pierce Brosnan did a movie called Nomads. And what we've got here is a universe like Bright, where we have life forms like the Dalai Lama as a child, little Buddha, that will say, no, that wasn't my hat. That's the hat I wore in a previous lifetime. When Jimmy Page, not Jimmy Page, when, who was it? The Who, not the Who, Jim Morrison was 10 years old. Grandfather Joseph Manfanga died in the crossroads. And theoretically, he passed his consciousness on to Jim Morrison, kind of like in that movie that with Denzel Washington did. It's an entity that doesn't die. It moves from one entity to the other. And the Navy had me go in to, I had some letters from CIA letterhead from Jim Morrison working in a laser company out of New Orleans. He did not die in Paris. It was the Swedish Secret Service that smuggled him out because he was an unusual life form. And if you want to read more about that, there is a book by Feral Press called Secret and Suppressed. And the article, it's an edited book, of which they talk about Captain Crunch, you know, Michael James Reconasuccio. Well, that a different chapter is by Thomas Lytle, who is editor of Psychedelic Monographs and Essays and The Secret Life of Jim Morrison. And when I went to check this whole thing out for the military, I found a fat Jim Morrison alive. Now, how does that work?
How does that work?
Try out Pierce Brosnan and his movie Nomads, and you'll get the concept I'm trying to say. There are entities like Dalai Lamas that are not human. They have types of memory and access to information you and I do not. And they're all among us. And while sometimes they say, oh, these are aliens, you know, and what they call shapeshifters and shit like that, I don't know about that. What I do know is my daughter was filming the solar eclipse about 3 years ago up in Salem, and a bright light came into her camera and started buzzing around and into her garden. And so instead of following the eclipse, she followed this light form, and then gave me the video. And when I broke it down into single frames, you could see the wings on it.
Whoa.
Findhorn.
Findhorn.
The Secret Commonwealth of Val Fun and Fairy was the first book ever written in parapsychology by R.D.L. Lang and presented to the Congress in England that first started that community, Findhorn.
Wow, Doc. We're out of time, man. We're out of time. I can't believe this. This has been so amazing. I hope the audience have enjoyed this half as much as me. It's one of the shows that I will now go back and listen to again, because you can't take it all in when you're in a conversation with a doc. You need to go back and listen time and time again. And folks, you can do that on the TFR website. Go to my archive. The full show will be in there. It's been a blast, Doc. We need to do this again sometime real soon, brother. But stay tuned to TFR, ladies and gentlemen, because the Freedom Link is on the way. And live radio all the way right here at tfrlive.com. And wherever you are, make it TFR. And as Whistles says, then he touch that dial.
Are we good? Do you want me to?
There we go.
Au revoir?
There we go, Doc. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, Doc. I'll drop you a message tomorrow again thanking you, but that was brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye,
Yeah,
Doc.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, folks, I describe and often have described interviewing Doc Miller as being akin to riding a wild stallion. But damn, is it worth it? How many topics did we hit tonight? I've got quantum consciousness, AI pre-crime, contacted by AIs, black goo. Geordie Rose was in there. We had an 8.4 earthquake, you know, just throwing in there. Inside information that he's working with the military on bunkers. He didn't mean to let that one slip, but I had to press him on that. I'm glad I did. Getting a little bit braver now when I'm interviewing people. I press them on certain things that I know you want to know more about. Different types of consciousness. He gave me a couple of films to watch, Liquid Sky and Nomads, and Fairies, and Findhorn. And I am the Walrus, Cuckoo. I hope you've enjoyed this half as much as I have. You people out there, over 300 still here, and the show's just finished, but you don't know how much it means to me and the guests as well. And you add to that the thousands that listen in on iHeartRadio, TalkStream Radio, TuneIn Radio, and of course the home of the Kev Baker Show at tfrlive.com. And I tell you what, folks, we are definitely going places. I hope I give you a lot of different guests to choose from. And from those guests, you get a lot of ideas, a lot of information to choose from as well. And as I always like to say, I provide, but I'll let you decide. You can take it, you can leave it. You can love it, you can laugh at it. In the end of the day, I think we're all here for the same thing, though, and for the same reason. And through that quantum consciousness, those quantum entanglements that we really can't even conceptualize, for the word of the night with the doc. You know, we're all here for the right reason at the right time. And I see a super chat coming in. I think it's already gone. Now, last night, I forgot to play the super chat from Lady Courtails. I felt terrible. She phoned into the show. She gave us excellent information about her dad. He works as a doctor. And I went and forgot to press the super chat. Oh, I don't even know if she's here tonight, but I'm so sorry about that. I'm going to play that first. And then I'll play Algo, his super chat as well.
Thank you, Kev. Much love.
Awesome stuff. That is brilliant. So then, if we come over here, I can find Algos. Here we go.
Thanks for having Doc Miller on.
He's absolutely tremendous. The first time I ever heard the doc, he came onto a show with me and Joe Joseph, And I had no idea who the doc was. Just thought, pretty cool. Guy worked with the X Files. Wow. I swear it's one of the best shows I was ever a part of. He just went from topic to topic, underground bases, battles with aliens, Antarctic, Nazi bases, you name it, the doc was on it. But you know, every time he comes on, he's always on it. I love it. And I hope one day he does get over to Scotland and imagine it. Me and Doc Miller up in Loch Ness. The mind boggles. A nice bottle of whiskey. I don't think it'll be much ESP training getting done, that's for sure. But folks, I want to thank you all for being here today. I had an appointment I went to today. That's why there was no, I had said I might do an update. I had to go out today. I'm not too happy about that. But yes, I will be in the house all day tomorrow. So God willing, we will have our first safe space in weeks, maybe a month or so. I want to get back to it, I really do. But I think now finally I've got the old strength back. And of course we're all going to be spending a lot more time in the house, aren't we? And again, a shout out to Backstage Boxing. He'd mentioned that he's been sent home from work. Anne's been keeping up to date with what's going on with her work. We've all got a lot of things on our mind right now. You know, people have got real stuff to be dealing with. And I hope tonight was a little bit of escapism away from all of that. I'll try and update people on that tomorrow. No hype, no fear, no crazy conspiracy. Just tell you how it is, how it's playing out, at least from my perspective, my opinion. You don't have to agree, that's okay. But I certainly am treating this as something very, very serious indeed. And when you hear about people that have been sent home from work, may have mortgages to pay, families to feed, you know, that's very real indeed. So much love to all of you. And if you want to support the show even more, please feel free to do so. A big shout out to Kathy as well for supporting the show. And we've got memberships here. We've got the Super Chat as Algo and Lady Court used. And the membership, you get the members only streams, you'll get your badges, all the rest of it. But you don't have to. I'll be back here day after day anyway, regardless. Don't worry about that. And hopefully a lot more Doc Miller time in the near future and a lot more new guests as well. Let's spice things up, shall we? So until next time, let me almost played something really rude there. That would have been such a, it would have been so crass to have played my Derek Acora clip, and I almost did. But we're out of here, troops. Keep your mind open. Keep looking for the woo, but not to the point where your brain turns to black goo. And remember, it's your say on the Kev Baker Show tomorrow night. You can phone in, have your say on what you heard with Doc Miller or anything else. Take care, folks. Remember to tell the one that you love that you do and give her a big hug. Give him a big hug. Got any kids out there? Give them a big hug as well, right? Much love from KBS.